Hi, I'm Shashank Bhargava, and you're listening to Three Things, the Indian Express news show. In this episode, we talk about two incidents that have put a spotlight on tribal issues in West Bengal. We also talk about an Iftar party which was organized in Gujarat as a way to bridge the gap between two sides. But first, we talk about George Soros and what an Indian Express investigation has found out. Earlier this year, the investment firm Hindenburg Research had made serious allegations of fraud and stock manipulation against the Adani Group, which had resulted in the shares of the company to fall sharply. And a few weeks after that, the businessman and philanthropist George Soros had remarked on this controversy. In his speech at a global security conference, he had talked about the allegations and PM Modi's silence on the issue.
Modi and business tycoon Adani are close allies. Their fate is intertwined. Adani Enterprises tried to raise funds in the stock market but failed. Adani is accused of stock manipulation and his stock collapsed like a house of cards. Modi is silent on the subject, but he will have to answer questions from foreign investors and in Parliament.
Now, this received a sharp reaction from the Indian government officials.
Ministers in the government saw it as a personal attack against the Prime Minister, and also they extended it to the nation, that he is actually attacking India's democracy.
That's Indian Express's national editor of strategic affairs, Nirupama Subramanian.
And because he has certain personal preferences, he doesn't like what the election in India has thrown up, and therefore he comes out with these anti-Modi statements.
To cite some examples, Union Minister Smriti Irani had said that this was a declaration to destroy India's democratic processes and that a war was being mounted against India. And External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar said this.
I could take a view that the individual in question, Mr. Soros, is a old, rich, opinionated person sitting in New York who still thinks that his views should determine how the entire world works. Now, if I could only stop at old, rich and opinionated, I would put it away. But he is old, rich, opinionated and dangerous, because what happens is when such people and such views and such organizations, they actually invest resources in shaping narratives. Now, in this particular case, it is very clear that he has very strong political preferences. He actually thinks that, doesn't matter that this is a country of 1.4 billion people, we're almost there, whose voters decide how the country should run. He actually thinks an election is good if the person we want to see wins. If the election throws up a different outcome, then we actually will say it's a flawed democracy.
Now, what is important to note is that this was not the first time that Soros was under the scanner of the Indian government. Back in 2015, a year after the BJP government came to power, 3 American organizations were put under a watch list, meaning that they could no longer give any financial assistance to any organization or individual in India without proper clearance from the government. And George Soros' Open Society Foundation was one of them.
And I don't know really that what triggered this particular action by the government, but we know that the BJP in particular is very sensitive to outside criticism, and maybe there was an anticipation that probably giving space to Soros might lead to complications for the government itself. Because no reasons were given at that time, except all 3 were foreign foundations, American foundations. Actually, Ford Foundation had also been put on a watch list along with that. But when the Prime Minister visited the US in 2015, Ford Foundation was taken off that list just prior to his visit. But the others remained, and in that list was George Soros as well.
So because India put his foundation under a watch list, and because Indian officials this year openly criticized Soros, it would appear that India does not want anything to do with him, or would not want to be associated with anything that he is associated with. But turns out that this is not the case. An Indian Express investigation which Nirupama headed has found out that India actually has no problem with giving funds to NGOs that are funded by George Soros. And India has been doing this for some time through the United Nations Democracy Fund. Nirupama explains what that is.
So the United Nations Democracy Fund, as it is called, it's abbreviated as UNDF, and it was set up in 2005. It was set up around the same time that India and the US were discussing their civilian nuclear cooperation agreement. And in fact, it was talked about during those negotiations a lot. It was an important part of those negotiations that the Americans were constantly saying that we want India to partner us in this democracy. What are your democracy deliverables? And so on and so forth.
So then it was decided that the UN Democracy Fund would be used to support pro-democracy projects around the world.
Basically, this was a collaboration between the world's biggest democracy and the world's oldest democracy. In September, when usually the United Nations General Assembly is held every year, Manmohan Singh is in New York, President George Bush is also there, and they co-sponsor a fundraiser for the UNDF. In the July meeting, they've both already pledged 10 million each for the fund. And in September, they co-sponsor a fundraiser. They ask other countries to contribute. So this is how it was set up. And through the years, India has played a very prominent role. In some years, it's been the second largest donor. In some years, it's been the third. And at this point, it's been the fourth. It's in the top 4 donors. It's the 4th largest donor. It's the US, Sweden, Germany, and India. And India has contributed at last count, which was in 2022, when they gave $150,000 to the fund. In 2022, it was the 4th largest contributor.
Now here's how this fund works. The fund asks NGOs around the world to pitch proposals or projects for which they need funding. And all these projects are supposed to be related to strengthening a certain aspect of democracy. And the United Nations gets thousands of applications every year, but only a few are chosen.
So every year, roughly between 35 to 50 are chosen for these grants. And the grants are not very big, 220,000. I think the maximum I have seen was 475,000. So in that region approximately, from anything from 190,000 to about more frequently 275,000, but in the odd case, 475,000. So when I started investigating this, I just looked at the NGOs and I just wanted to find out who their other partners were. And as I started looking in 21 and then 20, I found that many of them were directly being funded by Open Society Foundation.
And this foundation, like we mentioned earlier, belongs to George Soros.
And it has many affiliates. There's Open Society Initiative for South Africa, Open Society Initiative of West Africa, and Open Society Initiative of East Africa, Open Society Institute, meaning many offshoots. So this is how I discovered that while individual ministers are saying that this man is a dangerous guy, he wants to wreck India, he wants to, he doesn't like what the results are throwing up in India, that's because of his own political preferences. What was actually happening on the international stage India and Soros seem to have a lot of common ground.
Now, India actually plays a very important role in the United Nations Democracy Fund. It's part of its decision-making process and also plays a role in how its funds are going to be dispersed. And this fund, like Nirupama said, gives money to a lot of NGOs that are also funded by George Soros. And therein lies the contradiction, the paradox.
So, contradictions in foreign policy are always going to be there. It's not that everything, all loose ends cannot be tied. There will be some domestic imperatives, there will be some foreign policy objectives. Everything can't be squared up, right? But what struck me really about this was that the ferocity of the response against Soros.
And this is not the first time that there has been a contradiction between how India has reacted to something domestically versus how it has responded to the same issue internationally involving its foreign partners. Nirupama says that one such example of this was when last year BJP's national spokesperson Nupur Sharma, while appearing on a television debate, made derogatory comments about the Prophet Muhammad, after which India received a lot of flack from Islamic nations, including Qatar, Kuwait, Iran, Maldives, and the UAE.
And the vice president had to face the humiliation of having a banquet cancelled in Qatar because the emir of Qatar was the first to take offense, apparently. And at that time, India went out of its way to actually reassure its friends and allies in the Arab world and across the Islamic world. I mean, countries like Maldives which is also an Islamic country, were also very concerned. Perhaps among those that did not make a comment was Bangladesh. But UAE said something, and UAE is a very close friend. And India put everything that it had to firefight this growing condemnation across the world, and succeeded, in a sense, in telling all these countries that, no, we have actually removed that person from that position. She's no longer in that position. And we have taken quick action, and we believe India is a plural, diverse country. We make no difference. But then you have something like this at home, which is actually a fallout of domestic political ideology, the compulsions of BJP's domestic political ideology, the kind of speeches that have been made, which are basically hate speeches at various events around the country.
And she says that this contradiction is even reflected in the speeches of PM Modi, when he talks about India as a plural and diverse country, one that is the largest democracy in the world.
But all the while, not just Indians, but a lot of people around the world, a lot of monitors around the world, democracy monitors, are saying that India is going through a democracy deficit, a period of democracy deficit, that it is regressing on all the democracy indicators. And the other contradiction was during the Disha Ravi episode at the time of the farmers' demonstrations in Delhi, when just for saying that she supports, just for retweeting something that Greta Thunberg had put out, which was some kind of democracy toolkit on Google, and she retweeted it. And then you had the highest people in the country accusing her of conspiring against India. She was hauled up, pulled out by the police and taken to Delhi and accused of sedition. Just a teenager, 19 years old. So you have these compulsions domestically to show your constituencies that, you're a very tough government, you brook no nonsense, from these people who think they are liberal, progressive, and who are anti-BJP, and so on. There is this compulsion to demonstrate that you're a tough actor at home. And then there is this compulsion to demonstrate that you are this mother of democracy when you are actually interacting with your international partners, friends, allies, and whatnot. So this is actually the contradiction. And this contradiction has surfaced very often in the case of this government.
Talking about the investigation, Nirupama says that she only started looking at the grants of the UN Democracy Funds from 2015 because that was the year that Soros was put on a watch list. And the entire process took a fair bit of time.
Yeah, so as I said, we started with 2015 as the start date, and then found that from then to 2021, which was the last available data for these grants, there were 276 grants that had been given. So each had been given to an NGO. And so we had to look through each and every organization. And sometimes you didn't find it straight away. I mean, people don't mention their partners or funders. So you had to go through their websites, and then there would be some links to some of their work, then go through that to, who they were doing it with, and then from there to find out the link. So it was quite painstaking. And Shyamlal, who's our colleague in the Express, was very helpful in this matter. It took almost a month, or more than a month, I think. And I also read through, I think, 100 US cables on WikiLeaks. I mean, everything was open source. A great part of this investigation was that it was all open source. Everything was online, it was on the web, and I got all my information from there.
And next we talk about West Bengal. Last week, the Kurmi community in the Jungle Mahal region of the state ended their 5-day-long protest. The community, which is recognized as part of the other backward classes, had been demanding that they should be recognized as a scheduled tribe instead. And while these protests were going on, around that same time, 4 tribal women in the Dakshin Dinajpur district were allegedly humiliated and punished for joining the BJP. Now, both these incidents have sparked a political controversy and have put a spotlight on political parties competing for tribal votes in the state. In this segment, Indian Express's Santanu Chowdhury joins my colleague Anwiti Singh to talk about these issues and what they mean for the politics of Bengal.
So Shantanu, could you begin by telling us why the Kurmi community was protesting in the state?
Yeah, the basic demand of this Kurmi community is the recognition of the ST status. They want the scheduled tribe status as at present they belong to the OBC category. And their language, Kurmali language, be included in the 8th schedule of the Indian Constitution. This has been a very long-standing demand of the Kurmi community. Since independence, their demand has been there. Last year also, they held a protest in September, but that time also they didn't get any kind of confirmation from either the state government or the center whether their demands will be met. So this time again, they have organized this protest, and they started the protest on Tuesday last week, and it continued for 5 days. They had blocked the National Highway 6, and they had also put up a road blockade in Khemashuli area, which affected the passenger train services. And what we came to know that over 500 trains were cancelled and rescheduled. And there were huge traffic jam on the National Highway 6. So these were causing great inconvenience to the people. These were causing great inconvenience to the movement of food, movement of vegetables, movement of fish, which come from the Andhra Pradesh and all. So after 5 days, they decided to withdraw or leave their agitation, as they were thinking that the people were greatly inconvenienced, and they decided to bring their protest to the city of Kolkata.
Right, but even after going to Kolkata and holding a rally there, the issue didn't get resolved, right?
Yeah, no such headway was made. Still discussions are going on in how to address their problem, because it's not in the hand of the state government to give them the recognition. However, they can also give them a report that whether there is a huge number of the Kurmi community population which exactly need this kind of recognition, they can make a recommendation. But at the end of the day, it's the center which has to take a decision in this regard. So it is basically in the court of the both state and the central government. So no one government can resolve their issues. So that's why they want to open a channel, open a dialogue process with the state government and also with the center, so that their demands can be made.
Right, and around the time that this was happening, there was another controversy involving a tribal group where certain tribal women were allegedly punished for joining the BJP. Could you tell us about that?
Yes. During the time of this Kurmi protest, one incident took place in South Dinajpur district in Balurghat Lok Sabha constituency, where four tribal women, were allegedly forced to perform a Dandavat Parikrama, which is like an atonement for joining the BJP. So the state BJP president, Shukanto Majumdar, who is also the MP of Balurghat constituency, shared a video in a social media account where these four women were seen performing the Dandavat Parikrama. And he claimed, or he alleged that these women were forced to perform such an act because they had joined the BJP. Later, the TMC denied forcing them to perform such an act, although they said that the women performed the act on their own accord. And one of the women who had interacted with the local media at that time said that she couldn't sleep at night because of joining the BJP and making a mistake, because she deserted the TMC, so she decided to perform that act and return to the TMC. But after that, the four women have gone totally underground, rather. They are not interacting with the media. But the TMC, although denied forcing the women to perform such an act, they changed the Mahila Trinamool Congress president of the district. So a wrong message was sent through this incident, which did not go well with the TMC leadership or the top TMC leadership. That's why they had to take some kind of action, although denying that they had done it, but they took the action as this was generating a negative image of the party.
Right, so Shantanu, both these issues, the Kurmi protests and the punishing of these tribal women, both of these have riled up the state government and the opposition. And considering the upcoming panchayat polls and the Lok Sabha elections, can you tell us how this is affecting the state politics?
So basically, BJP enjoys the support of the tribal community. So they will therefore highlight the issues which are going against the tribal community. But the TMC, on the other hand, is trying to woo and win their support over. So that's why they are taking some actions to address their grievances. So in this regard also, they changed the Mahila district president of the South Dinajpur district. And therefore, as the panchayat polls are nearing the corner, it will be likely to be held in the month of May or June. So getting their support is very important for every political party, because panchayat polls is a grassroots level election. And so their support and their votes are extremely important. And you have to take one more thing into account, that next year is the general election, 2024 Lok Sabha polls. Therefore, every party will want to get their support.
Okay, so this is why the incident involving the tribal women is important to these parties. But what about the Kurmi protest? How is that expected to affect the decisions of these parties?
Well, if they are moved from OBC to the ST category, then they would enjoy the benefits that comes under the ST community groups. And whichever party helps them to achieve that feat will definitely get the upper hand from that community. And that's why it's a battle of the political parties to win their support over. So therefore, we have seen that during the time of the protest, which went on for 5 days, no concrete action was taken to leave the agitation, be it from the center or from the state government. After the end of the 5 days where things were going out of hand, the people were getting angry, people were not liking that kind of protest, the protesters themselves decided to withdraw their protest. So we can see from this that both the parties were trying to steer clear from any kind of forceful withdrawal of the agitation, as both are trying to win their support over. At the same time, they are not trying to anyway create an atmosphere where they are aggrieved. They do not like any of the parties.
And in the end, we talk about an Iftar party in Vadodara. Earlier this month, incidents of stone pelting and arson were reported in multiple states across the country during the Ram Navami celebrations. Around that time, clashes also broke out in the city of Vadodara in Gujarat. An FIR was filed against a mob of 500 people, and at least 48 belonging to both the Hindu and Muslim communities are currently in judicial custody for it. When we spoke to Indian Express's Adrija Raja, she told us that there was a lot of tension in the area even after the incident.
People from both communities were being arrested, and there has always been an accusation that police picks up local youth from the area who were not actually present on the spot. But this time the SIT has gone by the CCTV footage, identified people. There was, of course, tension.
Now, while this was going on, barely 2 kilometers away from where the clashes took place, 6 policemen accepted an invitation to an iftar party.
It was organized by the Muslim community of Nawapura area, which predominantly comprises meat vendors and especially running their shops in this lane called Khatki Ward, which is very close to the Nawapura police station. So they had set up this stage and a small enclosure for the iftari in between the police station and that lane on the main road. And 6 police personnel from Nawapura police station attended the iftari on Sunday, and the community said that it was very touched by the fact that the police had actually accepted the request to attend the event, and it was one of its first.
Now, the Nawapura area was not affected by the clashes, but members of the Muslim community told her that there was still a sense of mistrust towards the police.
So when we spoke to members of the Muslim community in Nawapura, they told us that the youth of the community had come up with the idea to organize this iftar and invite police personnel as well. The reason that they told us was that they wanted to bridge the gap. There is a sense of mistrust, a bit of insecurity and apprehension also about the fact that, there is police action over minor things. There is this misgiving that they are targeted. So the community felt that unless they reach out and speak about their issues to the police is never going to know what they are facing.
The organizers of the party also told her that the community wanted to thank the police for their cooperation in the past, especially earlier this year, when the Vadodara Municipal Corporation had cracked down on meat shops, which happened after a directive from the Gujarat High Court.
And it was a statewide crackdown actually following the Gujarat High Court order, where poultry and meat shops were, asked to show their licenses, and those that were unlicensed or not meeting the standard of hygiene were asked to close down for a long time. In any case, the mutton vendors were not really allowed to sell their meat for a while. The case is still going on in the High Court, but things have become a bit better now for them. The community was affected at that time, this particular community that organized the iftar, and they very specifically wanted to thank the police for not being unfair during that time. So, one of them told us how there were a couple of complaints that were made to the police station when there was the crackdown happening, but the police said that it was not their case to look into the matter since the VMC was looking into it, and they in fact even supported the meat vendors knowing that it was their daily bread.
And it seems for the police officials, attending the iftar party was a big step towards gaining the trust of the community.
So when we contacted the Joint Commissioner of Police, Manoj Ninama, who was also heading the investigative team on the day of the clash, what he said was that when we speak of community policing, one of the most important aspects is to be able to reach out to the communities to gain their trust. And attending such social functions is always helpful in bridging a gap and bringing them closer.
You were listening to 3 Things by the Indian Express. Today's show was edited and mixed by Abhishek Kumar and was produced by me, Shashank Bhargava, Utsa, Sarmin, Anwiti, Singh and Rahel Philipose, who had originally spoken to Aditi Raja for the 3rd segment. If you like the show, then do subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also recommend the show to someone you think will like it, share it with a friend or someone in your family. It's the best way for people to get to know about us. You can also tweet us at Express Audio and write to us at podcast@indianexpress.com.